Hi, I'm Sabina Brown. I'm the Outreach and Advocacy Coordinator for Oklahoma Policy Institute and the coordinator for Together Oklahoma. We are here today with David Blatt, who's the Executive Director of Oklahoma Policy Institute, to talk about the petition to overturn the recent revenue package. So right before the teacher walkout, lawmakers approved a revenue package to give teachers a pay raise. And that was significant because it overcame the 75% supermajority needed to raise taxes in Oklahoma, and that's not something that happens very often.
Right, it hadn't happened since State Question 640 was initially passed in 1992.
Right. So recently, there's a group called Oklahoma Citizens United, which we know is launching a petition to overturn this revenue measure. And this isn't something that's been used a lot in Oklahoma, so I know people have a lot of questions about it. So can you start by telling us just what is a veto referendum?
So this is an obscure provision in Oklahoma's constitution that says that citizens, if they collect an adequate number of signatures, it's 5% of the number of votes cast in the last governor's election, which for now is around 42,000 signatures. So it's a fairly low threshold. If they collect the signatures and go through the various stages of the process, it gives citizens the right to vote on whether to uphold or overturn any law passed by the legislature.
So what is the legislation specifically that's being challenged?
So this was the bill, House Bill 1010 XX, that was passed during the special session at the end of March that you referred to, that got the 3/4 supermajority needed for a revenue increase. And it had the major tax components that are being used to fund the teacher pay raise and pay raises for state employees and school support staff as well. So there were 5 components to House Bill 1010. There was the $1 pack increase in the cigarette tax. There was an increase in the motor fuel tax of 3 cents per gallon for gas and 6 cents on diesel. There was a change in the way that little cigars are taxed. There was a change in the gross production tax rate, so that initial production will be taxed at 5% rather than 2%. And there was also a new hotel or lodging tax that was part of House Bill 1010 that later got repealed by another bill. So this bill, House Bill 1010, that was the major revenue component, would raise about over $400 million. That's what's being challenged.
So do we know when we can expect to see this on the ballot?
Well, there's a lot of depends here. So first of all, it would depend on the petitioners getting enough signatures and surviving challenges, and we may have a chance to talk about that. If it goes through the process and they're successful, then the likeliest date would be at the time of the next statewide general election in November. But there's some possibility, if they can go through the process quickly enough, that it could be put on the ballot during the primary runoff election in August. The governor or the legislature also has the authority under the Constitution to call a special election, which could be held perhaps in late September if the idea is to get it on the ballot as soon as possible, but not have it coincide with the general election in November. One thing to be aware of is that it generally takes about 70 days between the time when a petition is certified as ready and when it can get on the ballot. They need to print the ballots, they need to do absentee ballots for military overseas and others. So they need about over 2 months between when it's ready to go and the election date.
So if this is successful, what happens to the revenue that we were supposed to increase under HB 1010 XX?
Again, there's different scenarios, but the short answer is that revenue would be stayed or put on hold until the time that the voters would cast a ballot, let's say in November. So it's possible that if they collect the signatures quickly enough and it's certified, that the bill would be stayed or put on hold before it takes effect. The effective date is June 27th. It's also possible that the revenues would take effect at the end of June. The petitioners have until July 17th, I believe, to collect their signatures. And it may be only when those signatures are collected and certified that the revenue would put on hold. So it's possible that the revenue would kick in, those tax increases would take effect, and then when the petition is certified, they would be stopped. But it's quite possible that they would be stayed before they actually take effect in June.
I know there's a lot of uncertainty with the school districts of how they would handle this if it was successful. Do we know what this would do to teacher pay raises?
So this is perhaps the most complicated question. The legislation that enacted the teacher pay raises, which was House Bill 1023 XX, and also the state employee pay raises, House Bill 1024 XX, both of those included provisions that said that these bills were contingent upon House Bill 1010 being enacted. The question is, has House Bill 1010 been enacted, and if it's put on hold or stayed, is it still enacted? So this has created a lot of uncertainty for school districts about whether they are going to be on the hook for giving teachers a raise if the revenue is put on hold. The Superintendent of Instruction, Joy Hoffmeister, requested an Attorney General's opinion that laid out some 11 questions, all the various uncertainties of this process. One thing to remember is that we have not had a veto referendum in Oklahoma since 1970. So it's been almost 50 years. So there are very few people around who've been through this process and can clearly answer, and every petition is going to be somewhat different. So one of the questions they have is, if the revenue is stayed, are school districts on the hook? It's possible that the Attorney General will say that yes, those raises still go into effect because House Bill 1010 was actually enacted. That can create other problems. There is a chance at that point that the legislature may come back into special session to change the pay raise bill to make clear that the pay raise only will take effect if House Bill 1010 is upheld in a veto referendum. So there are scenarios where the pay raise would take effect even if the revenue doesn't, but in likelihood, if the revenue is being held up, then those pay raises that teachers have advocated for so long, that contributed to the walkout and to the mass demonstrations at the Capitol, that all that could be called into question if this veto referendum does move ahead.
Thank you so much for clarifying this rather complicated issue. We know you'll probably have more questions going forward, so please visit our website, okpolicy.org, for more information.